Yo, what's good? It's your boy Stevie G coming at you with another episode of the Seamless Garage Podcast. On this episode, we're going to talk about something that a lot of people have discussed, especially if you drive diesels or you know about diesels, anything like that. Especially where I'm from in East Texas, everybody kind of has an idea about diesels. So, the name of this episode is going to be Why Modern Diesels Are Not As Reliable. It's a topic, I don't know if everybody's aware, to be honest, that they're not as reliable. You could have missed the boat, kind of, because you may not have, maybe you're not old enough to know the reliable diesels, okay? And so all you know is the new ones, and so you just think that's the deal, you know what I mean? Is that every so often you've got to fix some of these components I'm going to talk about. Or you could have been back in the good old days where they had reliable diesels, and then you got out of the diesel game for whatever reason, you know what I mean? You didn't need a diesel anymore, so you have no idea they're not as reliable. And that makes sense. You know what I mean? You probably tell people that the diesels are reliable, really reliable all the time now, and that's just not the case. So, but I think most people understand that because I hear them talk about it all the time. I hear them talk about the good diesels all the time. So I think most people have a grasp of like, okay, hey, what's going on here? At least I know that they're not as reliable. And maybe I don't know why, and that's who this video is for. So without further ado, let's get into it. Let me name a few stable, reliable diesels for you guys, just so you guys can get an understanding of what I'm talking about. So reliable diesels are something like myself. I actually have I'm very lucky to own a 91 Dodge Cummins with the 5.9 Cummins, 12 valve with intercooler, all that good stuff. So very lucky. That is one of the most reliable diesels that you will get to this day. Actually, that truck had been sitting up for 2 years before I inherited it. Right, 2 years, which isn't a long time. But it's set up for 2 years, okay? Any vehicle sets up for, over a year or so, you're going to have a few issues, that you need to check out. With this diesel, I was just going to try to get it running, and then it was going to be my daily, which it is now. I mean, I've had it for several years now. But first off, I had to, what I decided was, I was like, all right, I'm going to put a 5-gallon jug of diesel in it. I'm going to put a fresh battery on it, because it's obvious the battery's going to be toast, and see what it does. So I poured 5 gallons of diesel in it, put the battery on, get in it. It's in the summertime, so the glow plugs didn't really need to heat up. I turned the key over and immediately bumped the starter, and it starts right up. No lag, no extended crank. Started up a whole lot quicker than your typical gasoline engine. Like it was ready to go. Stayed primed and everything. And you guys that know anything about the mechanical lift pumps and stuff back in the day, and for this one to stay primed, that's pretty wild. That's a pretty wild task. So pretty cool. But anyway, so that's like, that one right there is known as like one of the most reliable. And then also the 7.3 for Ford, but the one with the turbocharger, okay, not the old one. That one's reliable too. It's just not it's not as powerful. It doesn't pull as good as the one with the turbocharger. That's the one everybody knows about, okay? Everybody knows about the 7.3 Power Stroke. Very reliable. My mother actually owned one of those, and she hot-shotted with it. And that thing, like I said, just very reliable. And they have a distinct sound too. I'd love to get one of those. I'd love to have both. Yeah, I say it both with an F. Both of them. But I'd like to have a 5.9 Cummins and a 7.3. I'd like to get me a 4-door, like a 93, 94 body style. That'd be really cool. But anyway, so let's get into this. I just wanted to name off a few like solid ones. That way, if you don't know what a reliable diesel is, you can look into them. Now, of course, when you get into semis or 18-wheelers, like I like to call them, there's a ton of reliable, diesels out there. But they're all having to deal with these same issues that I'm about to address. But there's quite a few back in the day that were great. Like my grandfather, he loved Detroit engines. He used to be a truck driver, so he would not get an 18-wheeler if it didn't have a Detroit in it. He did not like Caterpillar engines. He didn't like any of the other ones. He wanted that Detroit. So he always drove Freightliner. And as a kid, I grew up loving Freightliners and Peterbilts. Those are like my favorite, the old school style. Got to be the classic body style. So anyway, let's move on. Let's get into why they're not as reliable. So really, it all starts with emissions and soot control, like from the EPA. For the longest time, diesel was known as the cleanest combustion engine. You know what I mean? The cleanest emissions. Coming out the tailpipe, all you really had was NOx, right? Which, if you don't know what that is, look it up. But basically, it's what is produced when an engine gets really hot. That's what's produced in the combustion chamber. It's the only thing which they say creates, messes with the greenhouse gases and, the ozone layer, all that good stuff. I won't get into that, but that's their big deal with the NOx. But they let it go for a long time. They weren't strict on emissions at all because diesels burned really clean. Other than they get really hot because that's how they work. But also they, diesels put out soot. Mine puts out quite a bit of soot. You know what I mean? So that's what they wanted to do. They ended up, we're like, all right, we want to get rid of NOx, we want to get rid of the emissions, and we want to get rid of soot. So that was their two hurdles that they wanted to jump. And so here's how they tried to achieve that. They're still trying to achieve it that way. First one, I noticed a lot on the Titan Cummins, and I know everybody else has issues because it is the way it's built. You're gonna have issues. Okay, you're just gonna have issues because of the way it's built. So it's the EGR cooler. We're having problems with the EGR cooler, right? So the EGR cooler itself is kind of like a mini radiator, and they're in all different sizes and shapes. But the one on the Titan is like long rectangle. You know what I'm saying? And it comes off of the EGR valve, opens up, and then it goes back through your intake. So there's coolant that runs through the outside to keep it cool, okay, as exhaust gases go through the middle. Well, there's two problems with that. One, you got exhaust gases going through it, right? Well, they can get clogged, right? It can get clogged because what happens in a diesel? It puts out soot. So that soot builds up, can block off that EGR cooler. But the main thing that we have with the Titans is that exhaust fumes in its natural state are corrosive. They just are. That's why your regular exhaust systems and stuff rust out so quick and get so weak. Whereas most people, they'll go back with a stainless setup because it doesn't. All right. But they're corrosive in their own state, in their natural state. And so what happens is it gets in there, gets corrosive, and erodes away at the metal, and then coolant starts getting into the EGR cooler, and the engine starts burning coolant. And then you got to replace the EGR cooler, which are expensive, in order to fix that issue. And we have that problem with the Titans, with the Cummins, so that's just an issue. The other one, like EGR cooler, right? So the next problem is the EGR valve. We don't necessarily have this problem a whole lot on the Titans, but I know it's a problem throughout the field. Even when it was on gasoline engines, we had EGR valves on gasoline engines for the longest before we realized we could change timing, right? We could mess with the intake valve timing and get what we needed out of it to help with emissions versus running EGR. If you guys want to know how the EGR works, I will make a podcast on that if you want, but I need enough comments to make it worth my while because it's kind of a lengthy subject, but I can get into it because that used to be a big thing. And some of you guys are probably still dealing with it in the aftermarket or just working on cars in general on some of the older cars. So EGR cooler, EGR valve, and then SCR and DEF issues. So SCR, which is a catalyst, right? It's a selective catalyst reductor. And the DEF issues, which is, your diesel exhaust fluid, okay? So the SCR is a catalyst, and this is where they start messing with the emissions, okay? It's a catalyst that they put the DEF fluid in, right? They squirt the DEF fluid in, they dose it in the front, and as the exhaust fluid comes in, it gets hit with that, okay? And it helps with the exhaust. It helps with the exhaust emissions. But that fluid itself, that DEF fluid, is urea, okay? If you spill that DEF fluid on the ground, like you just pour some on the ground, you'll see what I'm talking about. Just accidentally pour some on the ground and just see. Because it's not bad for the environment, but just pour some on the ground and see. When it dries, it turns into like this, I don't know, fiberglass looking stuff, okay? And so what happens is over time that buildup gets in the tube, gets in the dosing valve, in the motor. If there's not enough liquid to keep it wet, it will dry up. And if it ever dries up, you're dead. You're gonna have to replace that system, and that's expensive, very expensive for something like that. And so are you starting to see why they're not as reliable? Because, and I'm not even done yet, but the EGR cooler, to me, it's a wear item. It's going to be a wear item because you have corrosive exhaust going through it. So boom, you got that issue. So it's not going to last because you got that. You're going to have to replace. EGR valve, same thing. Those pretty much go together. And then your SCR and DEF issues, the fluid that you've got to fill up every time you get a tank of diesel. Okay, you got to fill it up too in order to drive. Because what happens is they will shut the car down. They'll shut the truck down. They will let you know, hey, you're running without DEF fluid. We're going to shut you down. You better get DEF fluid within this certain amount of miles. So it's just like fuel in the matter that they'll shut the vehicle down if you don't have enough DEF fluid in your system. So here's some other issues that go along with having those things, right? Accidentally putting DEF fluid in your diesel. That is catastrophic. That is just, if you do that, you're about to spend a lot of money, okay? Unless you can get some insurance to cover it, you're about to spend a lot of money. I think Chevy, what's really cool about Chevy is they put the filler up in the engine bay, okay? Which is inconvenient, but I think like looking at it in hindsight, I think it was a great idea. Because on some of the other models and also on Titans, it's right next to the fuel filler. Which isn't an issue because they both got caps, right? Not a big deal. But if you're not paying attention and you take your diesel cap off and you pour the DEF fluid in there, you're about to have to replace injectors, which I don't know if you know anything about diesel injectors, but they're expensive. They are several $100s a piece, and you need 8 of them. Injectors, the fuel rail and fuel lines, your high pressure pump, fuel lines back to the tank, your lift pump. You're going to have to clean out the tank. All that good stuff, anything to deal with the fuel, okay, you're going to have to change. And that's terrible. That's a lot of money you're talking about there for a mistake that, you were just in a hurry on your way to work running late or something and you did that. You know what I mean? It's an accident, but it's a very, very, very expensive accident. So that's an issue that comes along. If DEF fluid wasn't a thing, this would never happen, right? So, I mean, you can't blame it on that, but at the same time, it promotes an issue. And then the last thing that is it's not really EPA related, but it is still restricted by the government, is fuel economy, right? So one of the things they do for fuel economy now is with the transmissions. They've got transmissions with more gears for more ratios for better fuel economy, right? Diesels already get pretty decent fuel economy over their same size gasoline vehicle, okay? They get pretty good because they're built to take a load, right? They're built to work. So They don't really stress as much, which means they don't need to use as much fuel to do what they need to do. So their transmissions are built like that for better fuel economy. And what that does is you get better fuel economy, but then you get a less reliable transmission. Okay, it's pretty bad right now. The transmission market is pretty bad right now on failures and the fact that we've got to replace them all the time. On our diesel, not necessarily though. It's got a really good transmission. I don't think I ever replaced one on them. Maybe one, but I don't think I really have. So, but anyway, with all that said, this is why I think diesels aren't that reliable. And a question I pose to you is this why we don't see as many passenger car diesels? Because it was a big deal in the UK for a while, and now we're not really seeing them. There was a few companies that were, I think Volvo had one, and I know VW was running them left and right in the Jettas and stuff like that. And it was very popular, very common to see a diesel Jetta, you know what I mean, a Volkswagen Jetta. So, VW had some issues with their diesel emissions where they got in some big trouble for basically making it look like they were passing emissions when they weren't. They did it with their gasoline engines too. So they kind of got in some trouble there, which shows you what kind of, VW's not a terrible company, but the kind of stuff they're having to go through in order to pass emissions in America, which is kind of crazy. Yeah, I know they're trying to save the world, but at the same time, their restrictions are causing a lot of issues. In fact, I need to make a podcast on that, so I'm going to write that down. But they're making a lot of issues with this because they've got 3 things they're doing. I think it's 3. I'm trying to think. Emissions, for sure. Okay, they're restricting our emissions, and they want our fuel economy to be better and better every year. They want the manufacturer's fuel economy to be better and better every year, and then they want safety to be 100%. Which is cool. That's cool. That's totally fine. But these other 2. Sure, we need better quality stuff, but I don't know. We'll get into that though. So anyway, tell me what you think. If this is new to you, cool. Let me know. I want to know. Is this something you didn't even know about? Do you deal with diesels on a daily? Did you know that diesels these days aren't as reliable? Or did you even know that they had diesels back in the day that you didn't have to do anything to them, but at a certain time, change the brake pads and do an oil change and all that good stuff, just your typical maintenance, and you just drive it. Let me know. Comment below, check it out. But, yep, that's my take on this. And like I said, let me know what you think. And we'll see you on the next one. I'm out. Later.